What's up, folks? This is Dan from Discern, and these are my thoughts on the new album from Rivers and Robots, Still Volume 1. Rivers and Robots is an indie pop and electronic pop group from Manchester, UK. The frontman, Jonathan Ogden, started this project as a solo act in 2011, just a bedroom musician, recording the first two albums entirely on his own on his laptop. Those first two albums introduced us to Jonathan's soothing, delicate voice, draped in thick reverb, and to his deeply biblical lyrics, markedly centered on God and the exaltation of his character. Where Christian music tends too often to focus inwardly and on our feelings and our expressions to God, Jonathan's lyrics were focused on declaring who God is and his great love and mercy to us. In 2014, Rivers and Robots released their first album as a band, a standard format, four-piece, drums, bass, two guitars, sometimes keys or sampling thrown in the mix there. This album, called All Things New, really lived up to its name. It was wonderfully euphoric to hear this new, lively sound of Jonathan Ogden's solo recordings joining forces with three other musicians and melding together so neatly. It honestly felt like this band was able to dip into everything that was good about the first two albums and just brilliantly paint the sky with it. In my opinion, the Rivers and Robots hadn't really found their sound until this album, until the whole band came together. In 2015, they released a great little 5-track live album, and just last year they released The Eternal Son, an album which I talked about a little on this channel. In fact, I talked about the album in one video, and I talked at length about one track, Wait For You, on another video. Links to both those videos are down in the description box and on the screen here. That album pushed deeper into their laid-back, easygoing, sunny pop vibe. The songs were more dense and sonically filling and more lively in personality than their previous album. And the lyrics were still richly theological and God-centered, so both musically and lyrically satisfying. Here again, it was like, man, Rivers and Robots sound great as a band. They certainly had defined their sound since coming together as a band. And in terms of the worship music slice of Christian music, saying they stand out is an absolute understatement. There's just nothing like them in the worship music scene right now. So when I heard they were releasing an instrumental cover album through Integrity Music, I was totally on board. I thought the Rivers and Robots sound, covering worship songs instrumentally with free reign to let the instruments do the talking. Yeah, I'll take some of that. But after giving it a few listens, I think I may have been a bit hasty in my excitement. Not because these are bad songs by any means. In fact, this album has some of the most touching instrumental moments that I've heard in months, if not years. But the fact I think I overlooked in my pre-listening excitement was that without Jonathan Ogden's signature vocals, what would this album actually sound like? Without what I would argue is the defining sound of Rivers and Robots, what would it really sound like? And the short answer is, it doesn't really sound like Rivers and Robots, which, was surprising to me at first. Listening through, the instrumentals just felt nameless and faceless. And then I started thinking, well, I don't really think Rivers and Robots has ever excelled at musically having a particular sound. So without their particular vocal sound, it left this album feeling a little vague, especially when lined up with the other albums in their discography. Now, before we get too deep into this review, some helpful facts about this album to better help you understand it. Firstly, this record is actually more of an Integrity Music project than a Rivers and Robots project. The idea was to create a musical experience for quiet meditation, soaking in prayer, as they've called it. And you see how, the full name of the album is actually Rivers and Robots Presents Still Volume 1. Well, the plan is that Integrity Music is going to have different artists complete different volumes of this instrumental Still series, this being the first volume. I don't know what the long-term plans are for this series. Just 3 or so volumes, more like 10. I mean, not really sure. I don't even know if they know at this point. Just kind of maybe seeing how it goes. In conjunction with the release of this volume, Integrity Music released a companion visual piece, just sort of a simple collection of nature shots edited up and stylized a bit. I've linked to it down in the description for you to check out. Plus, on Spotify, they released a short devotional voiceover from pastor and songwriter Glenn Packiam, speaking over the tracks, reading scripture, and sort of guiding your thoughts. It's structured around completing the devotional over 5 days, but the whole thing is less than 20 minutes, so you can easily check it out in one sitting. I've linked to that as well in the description box. I don't think it added too much to the album experience, but you may feel differently. And second thing, helpful thing to understand, is the type of tracks we have here. Most of the tracks on this album are covers of worship songs made popular by artists such as John Mark and Sarah McMillan, Chris Tomlin, Leland Delirious, Rend Collective, Matt Maher, many others. Some of these songs, such as the closer Revelation song, were written by lesser-known songwriters and made popular by a handful of other artists. You know, these are those worship songs that have sort of made the rounds. Numerous people have put their spin on it. The whole track listing here is sort of an eclectic mix chosen by the band of songs that they love, songs they've led worship with at their local churches. Some well-known, some lesser-known, some older, some modern, a pretty varied selection. There is also a track you may recognize already if you're a prior fan of Rivers and Robots, the track being We Have Overcome, because it's actually their song that they redid instrumentally. I think it was a nice touch, actually, to bring some artist-specific familiarity into that track listing. And the last category of tracks are the 3 short interludes, which vary in musical style from sort of smoothly jazzy pieces with electronic sample-based punctuations to classically inspired pieces written and performed by the UK group Epiphany Music. In fact, all the strings, the violin, viola, cello, and the horns, being I think French horn and trumpet, that you hear throughout the album were actually Epiphany Music. And these folks seriously took the whole record to a new level. I mean, really skillfully played, richly emotive, sometimes joyous, sometimes sorrowful or reserved, just incredibly well done across the board. So, since there's no lyrics to examine on this record, let's talk about sound. Let's talk about the music. From front to back, the flow of this album and the transitions between the tracks is generally pretty smooth and easygoing. I mean, you can tell the shape and arc of the album was definitely intentional. But this album doesn't feel like a well-defined whole. In terms of a definitive sound or a style or a characteristic, it's just a little too varied. Throughout the album, I mean, you have some pop tracks, you have some acoustic tracks, some classical pieces, some electronic / sample-based grooves, ambient / droning synth soundscapes with subtle field recordings mixed in, a whole spectrum of genres and styles. And it sounds like they just couldn't land on a specific sound to focus in on, but rather threw anything that worked on here. Which is true. Most of these songs are certainly individually workable, and dynamically they're placed back to back in a very purposeful and well-crafted way. But if they had narrowed in on one of these styles, I think they would have come through with a much more identifiable and distinct album, an album with a recognizable character and identity. With all these genres and styles together, the whole album just loses its shape and sort of loses its personality. But even beyond the genres and styles that pop up throughout the album, I think it suffers a bit from not settling in quite enough into that quiet, still attitude that's reflected in the title and the cover and just the overall purpose of this project. I think this feeling of stillness should have been played out more, maybe more fully embracing that soft ambience, the minimalistic sort of still waters feel. I mean, to be fair, these covers were certainly calmer than the originals, but I thought that the atmosphere was still a little too busy at times. I thought the drums, while they sounded fine, tended to make the waters a bit too choppy, pushing the dynamics upwards into places that pulled away from the resting nature of this project. Even the title of this album, Still, indicates a lack of movement or energy, which the drums weren't usually conveying. Now, understandably, they had a difficult task on their plate because when the music is generally this subdued or subtle, it doesn't take much to pop that ambient bubble and awaken the listener. And as the album weaved back and forth between more ambient atmospheric songs to these grander, more dynamically building anthems, or even just simple and steadily grooving songs, it sometimes felt like the songs were stuck in a strange middle ground, particularly on the first half of the album. They felt not quite sparse enough and not quite engaging enough. Honestly, they sounded like a karaoke track, something that's purposefully lacking vocals, but is meant to sound complete when vocals are added. So here, when the vocals aren't added, it doesn't sound complete. When they fill in the sound with other instruments, though, when they really build into something full and flourishing, or when they pull back and really simplify, both those angles, they sound great. But this middle ground in between is just a really stale no man's land. And I sensed, throughout the whole album that they were trying to walk this line between being in your face and holding your attention and playing the background and soothing you into a soft reflection and meditation. I think Revelation Song or Majesty are two examples of where they nailed both these sides the best. They hold your attention, but delicately. They left room for you to meditate and calm your mind. But some tracks leaned too far to one direction. Be Still and Lord I Need You were very still, but I couldn't sense the melody or even the direction of the original song. On the flip side, We Have Overcome, Boldly I Approach, and Savior of the World were so engaging that I found myself bobbing my head or tapping my foot more than actually quieting my mind. In terms of all the different genres and dynamic ranges, things did start to take shape and become more focused around the midpoint of the album. The second half is generally more piano-led, ambient and moody. I think this latter half was far superior to the first half, in my opinion. In fact, I think this second half, if it were a standalone EP, would be a real knockout. This is where it really started to take a definable shape, become something memorable and impactful. From the song I Exalt Thee onward, I think everything clicks and just comes together tightly. This half of the album seems to nail the mood that I think they were going for with this whole project. It's slower paced, it's peaceful, it's reflective, very easy to sort of drift off to. Now, where this half is where most of my favorite tracks on here come from. Some of my favorite moments come from all different corners of this album. I don't want to be misunderstood about how I think about this album as a whole, especially because of how it sounds. It sounds absolutely beautiful from front to back. The acoustic instruments in particular, like the soft, blunted piano, the vibrant strings, the gentle but confident horns, they all sound fantastic. And the mix and blend between these instruments and the electronic instruments or more typical indie rock instruments like drums, guitar, and bass was done so seamlessly, irregardless of instrument or where it was recorded or who performed it. The individual pieces of the mix come together brilliantly and create a really tightly united sound. And beyond just the sound, some of the tracks and specific performances on here are stunning. My personal favorite, the violin to close the album out on the track Revelation Song, is just breathtaking. It's mesmerizing as it floats and flutters over this sea of droning ambience. Truly, I have not heard something so emotionally powerful in many months, if not years. The trumpet on The Lion and the Lamb was a wonderful surprise when it sort of pops its head up. It elegantly and prominently fits right in. The crisp electric guitar playing the melody of I Could Sing of Your Love Forever brings back genuine nostalgia and makes you feel all the feels of the days when that song was being sung all over the place. As a whole, I think this album is an admirable experiment pursuing instrumental covers of these worship songs, and I think they crafted some moments that really worked, but some that didn't work so well. There's some tracks on here that I really love that I'm going to enjoy returning to down the road, but others felt sort of adrift at sea, not quite at home, not engaging enough, not ambient enough, just stuck somewhere in the middle. And in the end, they didn't really become memorable tracks to me. In terms of other Rivers and Robots albums, I wouldn't put this on top. I mean, partially because it doesn't feel unique to them, as I previously said. I mean, it almost sounds like some other band could have made this album. You know, the sound isn't markedly Rivers and Robots, but also because it just didn't speak to me quite enough and pull me in or stick with me as much as their albums, The Eternal Sun or All Things New. But there are some gems on here. My favorite songs being Majesty, I Could Sing of Your Love Forever, and the closer Revelation song. There are links down in the description box below this video for you to hear this album for yourself. I encourage you to carve off some time to check it out quietly, isolated, distraction-free. If you give it time, let yourself slow down and settle, I think you'll find some moments on this album to be powerfully and beautifully moving. There's also a link to Rivers and Robots' Twitter down in the description, plus a few other things I mentioned in the video, just more for you to check out. And with that, thank you so much for watching this album review. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel. New album reviews just like this release every Monday. Yes, I am changing the release day for these videos. I hope you can adjust accordingly. You'll still get one per week, but with the many other things I have going on, this schedule currently fits me the best, so it's sort of by necessity. Hopefully you understand. If you have a question or a comment for me about this album, about my thoughts about this album, or about something else, you can comment below this video. You can tweet at me at discernreviews, or you can send me an email, discernreviews@gmail.com. Have you listened to this album from Rivers and Robots? What do you think of it, this being their first instrumental album? Do you feel like they nailed the still emotion and atmosphere? Do you think it felt a little underwhelming? Maybe you thought it was deeply powerful and it resonated strongly with you. Positive or negative, whatever you think about the album or about what I think about the album, let me know your opinion. Thanks again for being here with me. Hope this helps. See you next week.